The relationship between human and house sparrow began about 11,000 years ago. People began to farm and build lasting settlements. In doing so, they created a new habitat and food source, one that the house sparrow quickly exploited. The bird changed its body in profound ways so that it could thrive alongside its human hosts. It evolved a bigger bill to crack open agricultural grains and the ability to digest the starchy crops that people crave. Not all house sparrows settled alongside people. The bactrianus subspecies kept its distance. It does so to this day, ranging from parts of the Middle East to northwestern China. Skittish and migratory, it forages for wild grass seeds instead of cultivated crops. Meanwhile, the human-adapted house sparrow was on its way to global domination. How do you see the difference between the house sparrow and the now living wild Eurasian sparrow? The Eurasian sparrow is slightly smaller than the house sparrow. It has an entirely rufous cap, a black patch on the white cheek, and limited black in the throat. Males and females are similar. The most obvious physical difference between male and female house sparrows lies in the coloration and markings around the head and back. Female house sparrows lack the bold grey, black and chestnut markings of the male. Whenever humans move from place to place, we bring elements of our home ecosystem with us. So, when Middle Eastern farmers expanded into Europe, the sparrow tagged along. How did the farmers feel about their avian companion? Emotions were mixed. The sparrow devoured harmful insects, especially during the nesting season when its growing chicks needed protein. But it also ate part of the harvest. By the 1700s in Europe, as settlements expanded and people shot sparrow-hungry birds of prey, the house sparrow's numbers reached unprecedented heights. To protect crops from the abundant birds, authorities took drastic measures. In Germany, for instance, they instituted a grim tax, demanding that farmers collect a certain number of sparrowheads per year. Officials counted the gruesome tokens, then burned them, so nobody would present the same heads twice. Meanwhile, over in North America, homesick colonists were pining for sparrows. Surrounded by unfamiliar wildlife, they missed the sights and sounds of home. So when they encountered small, brownish native birds, they named them song sparrow, chipping sparrow, white-throated sparrow, and so on. Never mind that these birds, collectively known today as New World sparrows, were only distantly related to the house sparrow from back home, or that indigenous peoples had their own names for the creatures around them. In 1841, a native caterpillar species called the elm spanworm was experiencing one of its occasional boom years. What could be done? These days, researchers know that caterpillar outbreaks are complex. It's tricky to determine the exact mix of factors that cause them and how long they'll last. But back in the 1840s, a few scholarly men thought they had a solution, one steeped in nostalgia, that an importation of English sparrows would do much in keeping the trees free from caterpillars. In 1850, Nicholas Pike, the head of a local scientific and cultural organisation, directed an effort to import 16 house sparrows from England. The sparrow multiplied and spread quickly, so quickly in fact that some wondered if the experiment was too successful. Had naturalists traded the plague of harmful caterpillars for a plague of crop-hungry sparrows? Supporters and opponents of the sparrows competed against each other in scientific magazines and newspapers. It became known as the Sparrow War, but it wasn't just about a bird. Many of the claims made during the Sparrow War were anecdotal, based on opinion, or hard to verify. The house sparrow did what it had evolved to do. It lived alongside people. As always, its numbers fluctuated as culture shifted. By the 1920s, for instance, cars replaced horses on city streets and the sparrow declined. It could no longer nibble on abundant stores of horse feed or pluck tasty grains from dung. In China, in 1958, Mao Zedong ordered all the sparrows to be killed because they ate too much grain. This caused one of the worst environmental disasters in history. In reality, the Cultural Revolution, with its planned economy and the expropriation of farmers who then had to work on state farms, was the cause of the crop failures. There is no information on how many sparrows there were in China in 1958, but if there was one for each person, there would have been more than 600 million. Hundreds of millions were killed. This led to a problem the next year. It was noticed that insect infestation of crop fields had soared. Sparrows ate pests such as locusts, and after the campaign, the locusts lost their major predator. This meant that killing the sparrows was counterproductive. The sparrows, it seemed, didn't only eat grain seeds, they also ate insects. During the next 3 years, 45 million people died in a famine caused by economic mismanagement, environmental disaster, and state terror. Today, the house sparrow nests on every continent but Antarctica. The bird numbers perhaps 1 billion. They have been successfully introduced in Australia, New Zealand, and many other islands. In southern Africa, birds of both the European subspecies Passer domesticus domesticus and the Indian subspecies Passer domesticus indicus were introduced around 1900. Birds of European ancestry are confined to a few towns, while the Indian birds have spread rapidly, reaching Tanzania in the 1980s. Despite this rapid spread, native relatives such as the Cape sparrow also occur and thrive in urban habitats. In South America, it was first introduced near Buenos Aires around 1870 and quickly became common in most of the southern part of the continent. It now occurs almost continuously from Tierra del Fuego to the fringes of the Amazon basin, with isolated populations as far north as coastal Venezuela. House sparrows are everywhere humans are, but despite this suggestive species name Passer domesticus, they aren't officially domesticated. The bold, tiny, grey and brown birds are found on every continent except Antarctica, hopping around cities, pecking at leftover food on sidewalks, and sometimes chasing away native bird species. A new study suggests how these birds have adapted to living alongside humans. The evolutionary process of natural selection may have favoured genetic changes that altered their skull shape and beak and allowed them to digest starch, similar to domesticated animals like dogs. And the human-sparrow relationship is, unsurprisingly, still complicated. While the species can be a nuisance for farmers, fears about its agricultural impact didn't quite bear out. It is, however, a troublesome carrier of pathogens such as West Nile virus and Salmonella. And then there's the battle over nest boxes. People who install a box for a native wild bird may watch in horror as a sparrow displaces or even kills the native species. Seeing this behavior firsthand can reshape how people view the house sparrow, but it's not clear whether these incidents are causing overall declines in native species. Broadly speaking, fluctuations in sparrow numbers don't seem to drive shifts in native bird populations. This issue is difficult to study though, and more research is needed. At the moment, sparrows are yet again on a downswing, Cornell Labs Project Birdwatch in the States found that between 1995 and 2016, the proportion of sites reporting house sparrows sunk by 7.5% and the average flock size shrunk by 22%. Concerned conservationists in Europe and Asia see declines there too, perhaps because of changing agricultural practices, insect die-offs, pollution and disease. When sparrows are rare, we tend to like them, and when they are common, we tend to hate them. Maybe it's personal. Some people love sparrows, some don't. I must say that I have always enjoyed the sparrow colony in my garden. The repetitive chirps they made in the evening, the bathing in the bird bath and the foraging in the garden.